I am shocked by this revelation. Shocked and appalled. These are some of my oldest and closest friends. They mustn't get the slightest inkling of this disgraceful affair.
The Ladykillers. A long time ago, before he was known as one of the greatest and most respected actors of his time, and way long before he was simply known as Obi-Wan to generations of moviegoers, Alec Guinness was a young, struggling actor trying to scratch out a living and a career on stage. His determination and talent led him into film work where he began starring in a series of comedies for the British Ealing Studios. It would be the Ladykillers that would become the most popular and beloved from Guinness's Ealing period. The British black comedy tells the tale of 5 criminals led by Guinness's Professor Marcus, who has a brilliant plan to knock off a bank truck and plans to use the innocent, unsuspecting Mrs. Wilberforce as an accomplice. Marcus rents a room in her lopsided house where he and his gang will set up shop and plan out the heist. Their cover is that they're amateur musicians who are gathering to practice. They turn on a record, leave their instruments on the floor, and hatch their scheme, while Mrs. Wilberforce is enchanted by the beautiful music coming from upstairs. They pull off the robbery, are about to get away clean until Mrs. Wilberforce learns what they're really up to. Then the gang gets boxed into a corner and are forced to do away with Mrs. Wilberforce. But that ends up more difficult than the robbery. It's a very funny movie and has much more subtle humor than what you would think. The first part is like a comedy of manners, and a lot of the laughs come from these hardened criminals trying to put on the facade of being this polite string quintet when facing Mrs. Wilberforce. Their confused, exasperated looks when she begins talking with them or knocks on their door for the upteenth time is really funny. The criminals don't act too over the top. The Major, played by Cecil Parker, is a very proper, sly con man. Peter Sellers, in one of his earliest roles as Harry, is the more loosey-goosey, gal-loving Cockney, who has some very funny throwaway lines.
I think I'd better ask the vet to make it a little more palatable.
Well, you leave it to me, Ma. I'm very good with birds.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Danny Green as the huge ex-boxer One Round. I just love that name. Is the slow-witted Muscle. And Herbert Lom as Louis, the deadly hood who's just disgusted with this whole idea and is quickly losing patience with this bizarre setup. It's not impossible to imagine that these guys could potentially pull off a crime. They don't seem like such an exaggerated, incompetent lot. The most colorful character is really Guinness's Professor Marcus, who exudes creepiness with his buck teeth and who just by seeing him looks to be a suspicious character who's up to no good. Katie Johnson as Mrs. Wilberforce is absolutely the most adorable, most lovable little old lady I could ever imagine. She practically steals the movie from everyone else. She's so incredibly sweet-looking and polite, the humor just easily erupts when these skunks begin lying to her. I'm left thinking, how can these guys not feel horrible deceiving this nice little old lady? But somehow these dangerous criminals are put in their place by her.
He didn't go the back way. He's done it. He took the rock.
I've nothing to say. I'm going to stay buttoned up.
The second half gets a bit more slapsticky as the gang spends the night alone in the house with Mrs. Wilberforce facing the task of disposing of her. Of course, there's reluctance of doing such an evil deed, even for Louis. Inevitably, a bit of backstabbing goes on between the guys, and one by one, each member meets their demise, until Mrs. Wilberforce is left in her lopsided house, once again all alone, with all the money. Even throughout the second half, with the more physical humor going on with the guys taking care of each other, I love the little comedic moments, like Mrs. Wilberforce taking the cases of money out of their hands, watching the guys sit through her tea party and the confused look on Sellers' face, the Major's intricate lie of a sad story to convince her that they really need the money, and when she says it's not a good enough reason to steal and holds her ground of what's right and wrong, they begin shouting at her that she's cruel for judging them.
I still don't think it can be said to be enough justification.
Madam, how can you be so harsh?
You're a cruel woman.
But to sit in judgment on your fellow
I'm
creatures.
sorry.
And I love when Mrs. Wilberforce starts using some of the slang the gang is kicking around.
I agree that we must stay low and buttoned up.
It's all really funny stuff. The actors are the biggest thing that makes this so entertaining. The idea is funny on its own, but it could have fallen apart so badly if the script wasn't so smart. Which got nominated for an Oscar, by the way. And if the actors weren't able to pull it all off, this could have been a real mess. Luckily, it all came together to make a really enjoyable black comedy. Joel and Ethan Coen take the reins of the 2004 remake. It was kind of a surprising choice. The Coens typically write their own original unique films. They hadn't ever done a remake at this point, so hearing that they were actually going to do a remake of what many consider one of the great British comedies was a bit of a shock. The Americanized film updates the very British setting to the Deep South. It's not a bad choice of location for this. The caricature of the South is known for having polite manners and proper behavior, that old Southern gentleman kind of thing. At least it's viewed more polite than New York. It seems like the best American counterpart for the comedy and manners setting the original had. But oddly enough, that aspect of the setting never really comes through in the story. Tom Hanks is Professor G.H. Dorr, who comes knocking on Marva Munson's door with the same request as Guinness had. He's looking for a room and has a group of friends who are amateur musicians. There are a few tweaks to the robbery and setup, but mainly it's the same story with 5 criminals pretending to be practicing music, but who are really there together to pull off a robbery. This time it's a casino boat. Comedy is a very subjective thing, so what I find funny, someone else might look dead-face at, and vice versa. The big problem with this remake for me is simply I didn't find it funny. I don't mind changes done for a remake, to try and create a different feel or feature different aspects of the story or mine some comedy in different areas. And there's some decent things in here. It's a beautiful looking movie. The update of the trains to the garbage barge that play a vital role in the story works. And I like how staying at Mrs. Munson's house is made to be a vital part of their tunneling plan. But as a comedy and remake, this is very forgettable. It's hard not to like Hanks in anything, and here he seems game to get into the exaggerated, strange tone the Coens were going for. It's the other criminals where a lot of comedy gets squandered and lost on. They're all so over the top and appear to be trying really hard to get laughs, unlike the original bunch who were just trying to keep a low profile. The General and Lump are simply background caricatures and don't offer anything. Lump is played so dim-witted to the point of him being a cartoon. Marlon Wayans dials things up to 11. He's vulgar and manic. I can't envision for a moment anyone would recruit him for a caper. I like J.K. Simmons, and he has a few funny moments here and there, but the biggest supposed laughs come from him suffering from irritable bowel syndrome and when he blows up his finger. Ha 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 ha. There's plenty of lowbrow humor like that. In the original, the entire gang had their own moments to shine. They felt like a unit who were all trying to work together in this house, and they had their own opinions and funny moments with Mrs. Wilberforce. Here, it's not an amusing ensemble. The General and Lump are wasted characters. Wayans becomes really incredibly annoying. Simmons gets a subplot with his wife and mainly complains about his irritable bowel, and Hanks is the one to mainly deal with Mrs. Munson. It seems like a mistake for the group to be so spread out, and not all having to be forced to deal with the one major problem together, Mrs. Munson. And besides, there's not much funny happening elsewhere. Just for comparison's sake, in the original it takes 10 minutes before the guys arrive at Mrs. Wilberforce's door to practice. It doesn't waste much time with the setup and gets things rolling. In the remake, they show up around 23 minutes, and really all these individual introductions of the characters could have been streamlined. Wayans working at the casino, okay, since that's important to their plan, and JK's wife comes into play later, so Okay, yeah, let's see them together. But the General and Lump, we could have just met them at Mrs. Munson's door. Here's another little updated scene comparison, just because I'm going off on this. In the original, Mrs. Wilberforce's parrot flies out the window. The guys are all fed up with dealing with her, and she says she'll just call the police to help her, like she usually does.
Now, you really mustn't trouble anymore. You know, the last time I just phoned the police, and they came round with the fire brigade and long ladders.
The guys panic, and suddenly they're climbing all over the house to try to catch this parrot. The remake does the same gag, but this time Mrs. Munson's cat climbs up a tree, and this happens immediately when Hanks's professor comes a-knocking.
Now, if you're not gonna fetch him, I guess I gotta call the police.
Police?
He has to climb up a tree and then falls down trying to get the cat. The original created a whole scene around this dopey problem, and the remake just squanders the gag of watching all the guys looking like idiots with no choice but to catch the parrot to avoid the cops coming. I don't know. I just find the original executes this joke much better. Mrs. Munson is a very different character than Mrs. Wilberforce too, and not for the better. Mrs. Lopsided was this little frail, lovable lady who is surrounded by this threatening gang, but somehow innocently begins to make them unravel.
I fell asleep. Somebody took the key out of my pocket. I'm very angry.
As you have every right to be. It's disgraceful, Mrs. Wilberforce. Shameful. Mr. Robinson will answer for it.
Oh, shit! Mind your mouth. This is a Christian house, boy. No hippity-hop language in here. Sometimes it's the only way.
Now listen, you ain't gonna hit.
I'm trying to help you, boy. Better yourself.
Here, Mrs. Munson is stronger, louder, smarter, and is a more fearsome presence. She's a more intimidating character than most of the guys.
It's just plain wrong. Stealing.
Madam.
I know your intentions was good.
No, they weren't.
And I won't call the police if you give back the money and y'all go to church with me next Sunday.
And engage in divine worship.
I made up my mind. Now, you can double talk all you want. It's church or the county jail. Think it over.
So that whole angle of seeing this timid little old lady in the midst of these threatening characters is gone. That comedic contrast isn't here. And that created a lot of the humor in the original. I guess we can say they're trying to reverse things, making the old lady smart as a whip and the criminals the dumber lot, but I don't think that makes this situation as funny. That's the humor of it. I mean, the old lady being somewhat oblivious to this lot and them having to try to act like amateur musicians in front of her.
Excuse me, Major Courtney. I wonder if perhaps you'd like some tea.
I wondered if perhaps you'd like some tea, Major Courtney.
This remake is really going for, like, bigger laughs, which I just don't think they come. The original just seems like such a better way to get laughs out of this story. I mean, I guess some people will find this entertaining, but with this broad, louder tone the movie has, I just never got into it. It was especially surprising since with the Coen Brothers, I thought they would do something more special with this story. But all it did was remind me how much more I liked the original. That movie made me laugh.
You're quite sure you're all right, Mrs. Wilbur?
Of course I'm all right. Now, will you please buzz off?